Hello everyone, in patch Luna 5, Varka will be releasing as the sole new 5-star character of the patch, an extremely exciting introduction to Genshin's playable roster. However, if you follow the current beta discussion on Varka, you'll know that his current performance based on early calcs is reportedly underwhelming, which has caused a lot of drama and discourse about his beta kit. So let's go over everything we currently know about Varka and address all of the concerns. But of course, do not forget that this is very early information before official release, so very subject to change. Nod-krai has a ton of hype pullable characters in the roster, so it's difficult to pull everything you want, as not everyone has the luxury to spend money on the game. But for those of you that do have this luxury, why not save some money while you're at it? And you can do this easily with the sponsor of this video, LD Shop. LD Shop works with suppliers who partner directly with HOYOMiX to be able to provide in-game items for Genshin safely, reliably, and at a discounted price, allowing you to save up to 30% off your purchases. And all you have to do is select what you want to buy, whether it's Genesis crystals including the first time top-up bonus or a Welkin, enter your server and UID or friends info if you want to give a gift, and in just a few minutes, whatever you purchase will be received in game. Quick, simple, and easy. And if you register using my link, which will be in the description and pinned comment below, you'll receive a 15% and 5% off coupon, which can save you a maximum of $30, giving you even more discounts. On top of that, if you spend over $80 in a month using LD Shop, you'll earn a free Welkin as well. So if you were thinking about or were planning to spend on Genshin already, save some money while you're at it by using LD Shop. Varka is a 5-star Animal Claymore user who ascends with crit damage. After completing his Witch's Homework quest, he will be considered a Hexerai character, meaning he will gain buffs when at least 2 Hexerai characters are on the team. Although Varka is an Anemo unit, he's not really an Anemo DPS. What makes him unique is that he will do Anemo damage and Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo damage depending on the elements of the characters in his party. At C0, he currently looks to deal about 25% Anemo damage. If there are multiple of those elements in the party, Varka will infuse the element following the priority order of Pyro, Hydro, Electro, then Cryo. But this priority doesn't really matter because of how his A1 passive is designed. The main part of it is that if Varka's team has 2 Anemo characters and 2 characters of the same element among Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo, all of Varka's attacks from his elemental skills enhanced state, which is the main source of his damage, will do 220% of its original damage. If you only meet one of these team requirements, Varka's main source of damage will only do 140% of its original damage. If you don't meet both of the team building requirements of this passive, Varka will deal significantly less personal damage. So his teams need 2 Anemo characters, then either 2 Pyro, 2 Hydro, 2 Electro, or 2 Cryo characters. So Varka will deal some Anemo damage, then the majority elemental damage of whichever one you pick for team building. To supplement this, the other part of Varka's A1 passive gives him 25% Anemo damage bonus and 25% Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo damage bonus if Varka has at least 2500 attack. And with his A4 passive, Varka's attacks in his enhanced state will gain a damage bonus buff when other members of the party trigger Swirl, which will happen since Varka needs to have another Anemo unit on the team. Varka's elemental skill is what his passives play around and is the majority of his kit. The hold version is just for exploration, but when you tap the skill, Varka will deal Anemo damage and enter an enhanced state called Stormwind Charge. During this state, Varka gains interruption resistance and all of his attacks will deal Anemo damage and Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo damage depending on the party composition, and the non-Anemo damage is what actually has the higher multipliers. In addition, entering his enhanced state gives Varka 2 uses of a special elemental skill called 4 Winds Ascension. These special skills each have an 11-second cooldown, and both of these charges will actually start on cooldown. To quickly reduce the cooldown to use them, Varka can hit an enemy with a normal attack, reducing the cooldown by half a second, which can happen up to 15 times. However, this base cooldown reduction isn't really enough for him to use his 2 special skills, but if you have 2 Hexerai characters in the party, each of his normal attacks will reduce the cooldown of his special skill by 1 second instead, which will be enough to get 2 special skill usages per rotation. Now, instead of using his special skills when they are off cooldown, Varka can instead use a special charge attack called Azure Devour instead, which consumes his special skill charges and currently looks to deal more damage. So to summarize Varka's gameplay design, he does normal attacks in his enhanced state, which reduce the cooldown of his special skill or charge attack, which he can then use to deal more damage. There's a lot of different combos being looked at by theory crafters at the moment, but I'm going to wait until closer to release to cover them since optimal combos can easily change when we're early in the beta. If you are interested in this info now, I suggest checking out Jackson Files' Twitter since he came up with many of these combos, or TGS's recent video about them. Varka's elemental burst simply does 2 hits of damage. The first hit will be Pyro, Hydro, Electro, Cryo damage depending on your team, and the second hit will be Anemo damage. Unfortunately, his burst doesn't get buffed by his important passive talents, so it's not that important to use every rotation. With Varka's base kit covered, let's quickly go over his constellations. C1 gives Varka an extra charge of his special skill or special charge attack and increases the damage of one of them every enhanced state. C2 makes his special skill or special charge attack deal an additional anemo attack. C3 increases his skill talent level by 3. When Varka triggers swirls, C4 allows him to buff the team's anemo damage and the damage of whichever element he swirls for 10 seconds. C5 increases his burst talent level by 3. And lastly, C6 allows Varka to use one free special charge attack after he uses his special skill, or vice versa. If you use special charge attack first, he gains a free special skill. C6 also enhances his A4 passive, giving Varka extra crit damage. At the moment, Varka's constellations look alright, but they aren't as impactful as they could be because his constellations focus entirely on his special skills or charge attacks. But at C0, they don't really do much damage, as most of his damage comes from his normal attacks. In addition, at higher constellations, Varka will actually deal more anemo damage instead, which is an interesting design choice. For potential build options, his signature is his clear best in slot, crit rate substat, and the special passive gives him a stacking damage percent buff after hitting normal attacks. And with at least 2 Hexarai characters, he also gets a stacking crit damage buff. The weapon also gives attack speed, which currently looks to add 1 or 2 extra attacks or save about 2 seconds in a normal rotation, so it will be useful. Aside from his signature, there are a lot of 5-star claymore stat sticks that can be used on Varka. Any of the ones shown on screen can be fine to use. For 4-star weapons, the best one on paper is Serpent Spine. However, it's very likely that in practice, you won't get the fully optimal full stack Serpent Spine because you're probably going to get hit. Other than that, you can use Black Cliff Slasher, the Melazine Claymore free from the World Quest, or the Fontaine Craftable. Unfortunately, these 4-star weapons aren't the best, making his signature a significant damage upgrade at the moment. For artifacts, the Hexarai set is his clear best choice since he gets the full benefits from it as a Hexarai character, getting a lot of attack and crit rate. But if you don't have a good set yet, 4-piece Shimenawas and 4-piece Desert Pavilion currently don't look that far behind. For main stats, you want Attack Hourglass, Pyro Hydro Electro Cryo Goblet matching your team comp or Attack Goblet, and Crit Circlet. Substats are just crit and attack. Finally, Varka's potential best teams. To get the max damage out of his kit, Varka needs to meet 3 different team conditions. First, he wants 2 Hexarai characters. Second, he needs to be paired with another Anemo support for 2 total Anemo characters on the team. And third, he needs 2 Pyro, 2 Hydro, 2 Electro, or 2 Cryo characters. In terms of the Anemo support, Venti is his clear best option. He's a Hexarai character, and with his Hexarai buff, he gives Varka 50 damage percent after Varka triggers Swirl. He also holds 4-piece VV and does decent off-field damage and groups enemies with his burst. If you don't have Venti, assuming you have a Hexarai character somewhere else, Aoife is a good option because he holds TTDS and can use 4-piece scroll as a not long character, meaning he can grant 40% damage bonus to Anemo and the element he swirled after triggering Swirl. C6 Pharoson is a decent option, but C0 Varka doesn't deal that much Anemo damage, so she isn't the powerhouse for Anemo carries that she usually is, but she does get better with Varka constellations. Lan Yan is fine if you want a shielder and a VV holder. Sucrose and Kazuo are also fine for their damage buff in CC, with Sucrose fulfilling the Hexarai requirement and giving a small damage buff with her Hexarai bonus. Lastly, you can use Jean as a healer, especially if she's C4 for some Anemo Restrid, and her C2 gives attack speed, which can also be nice. Now for the other element, Double Pyro is the best elemental option because Durin and Bennett are strong supports. Durin is a Hexarai character, gives Restrid, and deals good off-field damage, and Bennett of course gives a ton of attack while also being a healer. If you don't have Durin, your next best options include Mawika, Xiangling, and Toma, but they are all decently behind Durin in terms of performance. Other than Pyro teams, you can play some Hydra teams mainly with Farina. If you have Siegeween, she's a good healer option while also buffing Farina's damage. But otherwise, you can run Jean as an Anemo healer and use Mona instead, as she helps fulfill the Hexarai team requirement. With constellations like C4 on Jean and Mona, the team is fine. Without these constellations, the Siegeween team version currently looks better. For Electro teams, one option is Eonsun plus Fischl. Sara can work as well. Eonsun for her attack buff and Fischl for off-field damage and counting as a Hexarai character, although her Hexarai enhancement doesn't really do anything because her attack buff requires overload. And for cryo teams, the best damage option is looking to be Escoffier plus Shenhe since the other cryo options aren't very good. Lastly, you can choose to ignore the entirety of Varka's kit and just play him as an Anemo driver for a Columbina plus an Epha team. And because of his current numbers, it's actually one of his best teams, which kind of speaks to Varka's current power level. That's everything on Varka as of now. To get straight to the point, for a newly released DPS of nod-krai, Varka currently looks underwhelming. In Varka's best teams, which are his Pyro teams, early cucks have him doing around 80 to 95k team DPS at KQM standard, with the higher end having him perform his theoretically more optimized combos. This range of damage might have been very good in late Fontaine and early Notlan, but we are in nod-krai where the power level of teams have drastically increased. 80 to 95k team DPS is just underwhelming for a new character when all the newly released lunar DPSs with Columbina are on par with Malwika's best teams, and the lunar DPSs still do more damage than Varka in their best teams without Columbina. His actual kit design is fine, but with how his damage is tuned, there are some weird inconsistencies. His whole Hexorai passive revolves around him normal attacking to perform his special skill or special charged attack, having a similar playstyle to Zibai and Flynn's, but their multipliers are somewhat underwhelming, leading to the majority of his damage coming from his enhanced normal attacks, which is similar to Skirk. But then if you look at Varka's Constellations, they mainly focus on buffing his special skill and charge attack, so there's kind of a clash in kit design philosophy. Is he mainly supposed to be a normal attacker, or are you supposed to be incentivized to using his special skill or charge attack? In theory, Varka is supposed to be a versatile DPS because he can play in Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo teams and be a main DPS for each element. And while this may hold true in Imaginarium Theater, in practice, Varka working with different elemental teams isn't very useful because his double Pyro teams with Durin are significantly better than teams of other elements. The 80 to 95k team DPS range I referenced was only referring to double Pyro teams. For double Hydro, Electro, and Cryo, they look to deal around 70k team DPS, which isn't very good at this point of the game. So in his current state, Varka is realistically just sticking with his Pyro team. For many of the recent new character releases, HOYOverse has done a fairly good job setting a certain DPS level and balancing around that standard. For example, even with some of the nod-krai supports being very strong, all the 3 lunar DPSs are similar in performance in their best teams and all reach an expected level of strength. So it is quite surprising that Varka misses the mark damage-wise when accounting for the expectation of increasing strength that has been set for nod-krai. Since the problem is mainly damage, I think the easiest fix is to increase his damage, specifically of his special skill and charge attack. This would give these abilities much more importance, which is already implied with his passive talent and constellations. So increasing these attacks multipliers would give a more clear direction of his kit. And of course, just doing more damage would obviously alleviate his major issue. Personally, I would like him to deal around 110k to 120k DPS at KQM standard, as I was expecting Nicole's release to buff him to a similar level to Malwika and the lunar DPSs with Columbina. But we're not sure if this will happen. Varka's patch is the patch after Chinese New Year, and every single post-Chinese New Year 5-star release have been, unfortunately, underwhelming, including standard characters like Mizuki and Dea, who had a very infamous beta cycle. I don't think Varka is going to be on the standard banner. He seems a bit too good and hyped for that, but it really depends on what happens in the version 3 beta, which typically contains the biggest changes. Now reportedly, some beta testers have said that they skipped version 2 of the beta and they're already in version 3, so if that's true, that doesn't really bode well for Varka, but nevertheless, for all the Varka enjoyers, all we can do is just hope and pray for positive beta changes in the upcoming weeks. I hope this initial overview and analysis on Varka's beta kit was helpful to you all. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, like the video, or sub to the channel if you enjoyed, and with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.